Hello, and welcome to our river cruising masterclass. Today, we are actually going to be on episode 4 of the Rhine River part, part 4 of our Rhine River series. And I am so excited to be actually talking about something that is really unique to the Rhine, which is the Rhine Gorge. I don't know if you always hear about the castles, but actually kind of understanding where they come from and what they do are two completely different things, right? So there's basically a stretch of river where, time bends, where the hilltop fortresses cling to the cliffs, and you can hear all of the history as you sail on by. So basically, from the Swiss border in Basel to the dramatic cliffs of Olbens, which the Rhine River is home to one of the most concentrated collections of castles in the world. Many built for power, protection, and some for profit. Uh, in this episode of the River Cruising Masterclass with Sydney, the owner of the Poodle Booked It, we are going to go through some of actually all. I'm going to go very quickly through every single castle on the Rhine River, the 40, at the top 40. I'm not doing all. There are some smaller ones. The top 40 of the castles and don't want to get ahead of myself. Top 40 castles and a little bit of their history. So let's start with the Marksburg Castle, it's in Brachbusch. It was actually built in 1150, and it was built by local nobility and later expanded by the Epstein family not the Epstein family, in 1219. It served as various roles, including a prison and a Prussian military stronghold. It was actually never destroyed, and it's one of the only hilltop castles on the Rhine that has never been ruined. The Marksburg Castle continuous perseverance offers an authentic glimpse into a medieval fortification architecture, and it actually is now houses the German Castles Association. So it is still an historical importance even to this day. Rheinfels Castle, which is in the St. Goar area, was actually built in 1245. Some of these days, honestly, just don't feel real, if you truth be honest. Like something that old, like sometimes I just can't comprehend. It was constructed by Count Dieter the Fifth of Classabosselingen. I for sure butchered that. To collect tolls. That is something you will hear on your river cruise as you're sailing across this. There's so many of them, and you had to they collected tolls at each one. So you would just be paying hand over fist to get down the Rhine River in its heyday. But it was actually one of the largest fortresses on the Rhine and capable of holding 4,000 people. It was destroyed in 1797 by French revolutionary troops. And despite its ruined status, the Rheinsfeld remains a testament of like medieval military architecture and the region's turbulent history. So the Stolzenfels Castle, which is in the Koblenz area, was originally built in 1259 and was a medieval fortress constructed as a toll castle. It was destroyed by the French in 1689 during the Nine-Year War and was rebuilt in the 19th century by Crown Prince William IV of Prussia as a summer residence. It is basically a great example of 19th century Roman romanticism, blending the medieval ruins with the romantic architecture of that time when it was rebuilt. And then this is one of the ones that's actually probably going to be one of the most popular ones and ones you'll see on a lot of the graphics for the Rhine River. The Pfalzgrafenstein Castle was built in 1327 and was constructed by King Ludwig the Bavarian as a toll station on the small island. So this is actually going to be in the middle of the Rhine River. And it was never destroyed. And for its unique location in the middle of the river, it's still well preserved and basically looks like a ship. So if you're looking at it from on top, it has that ship sort of view to it. And it's one of those things that's definitely one of the most photographed ones of the Rhine region. The Katz Castle was built in 1371 and was built by Count Wilhelm II of Kasselblochbogen to collect tolls. Again, collecting tolls, right? I told you this is all about tolls. Like, I know we're all money hungry now, but we always have been and always will be, basically. It was destroyed in 1806 by Napoleon, and it was part of the Hostile Brothers duo near the Mouse Castle, symbolizing like feudal rivalries. So it is now privately owned, and it is actually has, again, as we said, a feud with another one. And that's where we go to the Mouse Tower. So basically, cat and mouse, right? So so this one was built in 1356 and was erected by the Archbishop of Trier to counterbalance the Katz Castle. It has suffered damage over the centuries, but was restored in the 20th century. And it represents like the unique power struggle and the strategic importance of the Rhine, because you literally had two fueling, you know, royals fighting for who could get the most tolls. Cat and mouse. Mouse was built first, though. Just saying. I'm just saying. The Schönburg Castle is considered like the hunter's retreat. So it was first mentioned in 1271, but it was then destroyed in 1282 by King Rudolf and was rebuilt again in the 14th century and then destroyed again in 1689 by the French troops during the war. And so it was reconstructed in the 19th century as a hunting lodge and basically signifies the Romantic era restoration efforts of the Rhine River. So the Lahneck Castle, if you are looking for an inexpensive way to stay in a castle on the Rhine River, this is the way to do that. It was originally built in the 12th century and serves as a residence for the Archbishop of Cologne. It was destroyed in 1689 by French forces, but it was rebuilt in the 20th century and is now operated as a hostel. So blending historic preservation with modern use. So again, if you are looking to stay on the Rhine on the cheap, this is the castle, but I will tell you there is another one that is for our luxury staff. Staff, clients, people who want to live the best life. That's how I usually do myself. So the Rheinstein Castle was built in the early 14th century, and it fell into ruin and was actually purchased and restored in the 19th century by Prince Frederick of Prussia. It was destroyed by the French troops in 1801, and the Prussians rebuilt it as part of a defensive system. It's one of Europe's largest fortresses and played a crucial role in the regional defense and now houses museums and cultural events. Now, another castle is going to be the Ehrenbreitstein Fortress. Again, I apologize in advance for how much I'm butchering all of these things. So, it was the original fortifications date back to the 11th century, and the current structure that you see today, again, it's just a AI photo, is from the 1817 to 1828 area. It was destroyed in 1801, and the Prussians rebuilt it as part of the defensive series as well. So you'll see that kind of actually happened a lot. Okay. So the Günderrode Castle was actually built in 1220. Constructed by the lords of the Falkenstein, later expanded to the Count of Pfalzgrafenstein. This one worked in tandem with another castle to collect tolls from passing ships. It was destroyed in 1689 by the 9 Years' War by French troops, and it did serve as a key fortification for toll collection and defense. The amount of money that they got from these ships is just ridiculous. You think we're taxed now, right? My goodness. Now, not to be confused with the Schönburg Castle or Palace in Vienna. This is the Schönburg, so there's no R, no double O. It was built in the basically 1100, and it was initially built for the Lord of Schönburg and destroyed in 1689 by the French forces, but reconstructed in the 19th century. It now operates as a hotel and restaurant, offering panoramic views of the Rhine and with a luxury hotel feel. This is where I would pick to stay if I was to stay on the Rhine River versus the hostel, but that's just a personal preference. I mean, you do you, but I'm gonna stay here. Okay, the Liebenstein Castle was built in 1284 by the Lords of Liebenstein and also known as one of, again, as we talked about before, the Hostel brothers castles, along with the Sterrenberg Castle. This has suffered much damage over the centuries, but was restored in the 19th century. And so, as we talked about before, feuding brothers, things of that nature that really just caused a hostile environment for those who are traveling on the Rhine. Another one of those is going to be the Sterrenberg Castle, and that was built in 1034 and is one of the oldest castles on the Rhine River. And paired with some of the other ones that we talked about, it kind of leads into the Hostel Brothers legend. It was partially destroyed over time, not by people, but just by Mother Nature. But it represents just medieval feuds and legends that happened along the Rhine River. And you'll hear about that in our next episode. Some of the yeah. Anyways, the Lahneck Castle is next, and it was actually built in 1244 by the Archbishop of Mons, and it was destroyed again by the French troops in 1689. You know, it's Europe. And it was rebuilt in the 19th century and is still there today as basically a viewpoint of 19th century architecture. Now, the Martinsburg Castle was built in 1356 and was again built by the Archbishop of Mons as a toll and customs station. It has survived various conflicts and is actually very well preserved. And it serves as an administration center and currently does sit to collect taxes as it did back in in the 1300s. So at least it stays consistent. So the Philippsburg Castle was built in 1568. Ooh, it's an old one. My goodness. It's basically practically today's time compared to these ones from the 1200s. It was built as a residence for the Landgraves of Hesse and now houses the European Castles Institute. It was never destroyed and well preserved and is basically an example of the Renaissance architecture along the Rhine River. The Osterpaya Castle was built around 1271 and was originally built for the Lords of Osterpaya and underwent several ownership changes. It has suffered damage over time, but it basically represents a typical small noble residence along the Rhine. So this is not going to be like the princes or the archbishops. This is going to be like your just small nobility. So the Boppard Castle was built in 1250 and was constructed by the Archbishop of Trier and served as that defensive structure for the town. It was partially destroyed, but remnants integrated into town structures. So basically, it illustrates how these castles were turned into urban developments and how they were incorporated into the towns that you see now along the Rhine River. The yeah, the Heimburg Castle was built in the 13th century and constructed to protect the surrounding region and oversee that river traffic. It was restored in the 19th century, but was actually never destroyed and is an example of the Romantic era restoration that happened. Now, the Fürstenberg Castle. That was a strategic ruin. It was originally built in 1219 by the Archbishop of Cologne as he was securing his territory at that time. And it was destroyed in 1689 during the 9-Year War. And again, it served as that strategic fortification to control the river's commerce. Because in medieval times, the rivers are how everyone, got from one point to the other and how they shipped things along. So you'll see how important that is and how much, even though we use the river for tourism, how it was and still is used for commerce in Europe. Stolzenfels Castle was built in the 12th century and was constructed to protect the town of Bacharach and oversees the Rhine. It originally fell into ruins in the 17th century and is basically just part of that network of castles that secured the Middle Rhine Valley for that region. Now you have the Ehrenfels Castle, which is near Rudesheim, which again is one of my favorite cities on the Rhine River. I absolutely love the Rudesheim area. It was built around 1212 by the Archbishop of Mainz to protect his territory, right? As we talked about, that's kind of their thing. And it worked in conjunction with the Mouse Tower to control the river traffic. Now, the Castle was built in the 12th century and originally as a defensive tower. So it's not really a castle, but it was expanded in the 19th century to have a little bit like to add more to it and what it does. So it was not destroyed, it was preserved and then modified and represents how the evolution of that medieval fortification was then created into residential estates in the 19th century. Now, the Braunsberg Castle, also in the Rudesheim area, was built in the 10th century and is one of the oldest castles on the Rhine, serving as both a residence and a fortress. And it did suffer damage over the centuries, but was restored in the 20th century and now houses my favorite, a wine museum, reflecting also on the region and how much the viticulture has developed this region and the wines that it does produce. Now, the Reichstein Castle was built in the 11th century and home to robber barons, which I love a good story. It was destroyed in 1253 and then rebuilt in the 19th century. And it illustrates like the lawlessness of the Middle Ages, the subsequent Romantic era restoration, and how it wasn't all roses and sunshines back in the Middle Ages, if you know what I mean, right? Like, they did what they wanted, and some of them got away with it, right? I mean, how much stuff do you see today? So, the Reichstein Castle was built in the 11th century. Oh, no, I already talked about that. My bad. And then you have the Rheinstein. You look at the names, and they're very close. So, last one, I'll go back so you can see it. Is Reich, right? And the next one is Rieni. So the the Rhine the Rheinstein Castle, which was built in 1316, was built to control those trade routes and fell into ruins as they were back in the day and restored in the 19th century. It was abandoned in the 17th century and is basically a model of that 19th century romanticism and how are great for those. You can restore those old castles, right? Like TLC, no, HGTV, restore that old house, restore that old castle. Let's go. Anyway, easily distracted. Okay, the Sunna Castle was built in the 13th century and destroyed in 1689 during the Nine-Year War and then was rebuilt as a hunting lodge. So it basically is, a lot of that is what you're going to see here in that region and just kind of all those things. Okay, now the Lahneck Castle was built in the 14th century and it actually served as a watchtower and a signal station to protect the town of Lorch. It fell into disuse and ruin. So basically, it was a defensive network, not really a castle, but used to notify if someone was going to attack the village that was near the castle. I mean the watchtower. Now you have the Schloss, which was built in the 14th century, originally constructed by the Count of Sayn. And this castle has undergone several renovations, especially in the 19th century under Prince Ludwig zu Zayen Wittgenstein. It did suffer damage through various conflicts, but this new house actually is known for its butterfly garden and park. So my Aunt Nina would fall in love. She loves her butterflies. So similar to the Schloss Cyan, we have the Schloss Ingers. And this is our rookie on the block, built in the 1758, 1762. Like, it was built as a hunting lodge for the Prince Elector. and it showcases the Rococo architecture. It is a well-preserved thing, and it is currently serves as a cultural center and concert venue, identifying the artistic heritage of the region. I mean, it's basically a baby. What? It's only 300 years old? Less than? Boring. You s you start looking at all these castles and you're just like, "Ugh, yeah, is it older than the United States? Yes, but compared to these bad boys on the street, it's a baby." Like, if castles had voices, like, I'd be like, "It's just a baby." Anyways, so the Aldwych Castle was built in the 12th century and constructed by the Lords of Weed, and it serves as their ancestrally seat. It did fall into ruin over the year, but the ruins are basically a testament of the medieval history and just this region and how many castles noble families built here but did not sustain. Now the Marienburg Castle was built in the 19th century, so we've got even more of a baby here. Built in the Gothic Revival style, and it's actually a private residence. And you can't stay here, but I wish we could because it looks absolutely gorgeous. Now, the Hammerstein Castle, which was built in the 10th century, is one of the oldest castles on the Rhine and was a significant stronghold in the Middle Ages. It was destroyed in the 17th century during the 30-Year War, but its ruins is among the oldest along the Rhine, marking it as early medieval fortification efforts. So there's not much to see there. It's just the ruins. Okay. The Schloss Arnfeld was built in 1258 and built by the Archbishop of Cologne and later transformed into a Baroque palace. It has gone various renovations and is currently used for events and wine production. So a lot of my most famous things. But as you can see that you have a lot of the same people who are building these castles as that defense for, what they're seeing. So the Dattenberg Castle was built in the 13th century and established by the lords of Dattenbergs and served as a local stronghold. These ruins offer an insight into the feudal structure of the region and just like how you would have that small nobility or maybe those small lords building this to protect their cities that they had. Linz Castle was built in 1365 and was constructed by the Archbishop Henrik of Wierenberg as a toll and custom stations. It is still well preserved to this day and now serves as a courthouse, showcasing like the adaptive reuse of historical structures. Now, to people in Europe, right, like everything is historical, so it doesn't have that significance that we have here in the States. But it's just interesting to see what people do with things and how it works. Now, the Orkenfels Castle was built in the 13th century and built by the lords of Orkenfels and is part of the defensive network along the Rhine. It did not have any it was not destroyed, but it did suffer damage over time and was partially restored. The castle's remnants highlight the strategic importance of the river fortifications. And so, as you will see here, and as how you saw how the French have destroyed so many of these castles, is that one side of the river is German, one side of the river is France. And then you also have, if you listen to my last podcast, the Romans before them. So this river was so important to trade, to safety, to strongholds. So having these castles and these fortresses were such a huge defense and made it so that they would be able to do certain things. So you also have, and this is number 40, the Drachenfels Castle, which was built in 1138 by the Archbishop Bishop Arnold of the First of Cologne to protect the region. It was destroyed in 1634 during the 30-Year War, and basically the ruins have inspired numerous artists, and writers contributing to the romantic image of the Rhine. And so you have the dragon's legend, which was named after that legend that Siegfried had slayed the dragon that lived in the cave on the mountain of this castle. So there's just so many things. All right, so I kind of wanted to go through here. This serves as like an example of what the Rhine River looked like. So the number of castles that are completely in ruins is an 8. The castles that were repurposed is 5. You have 12 castles out of the 40 that were well preserved. And then you have 15 castles that were partially restored since they were built. And in terms of the construction timeline, as we talked about, most of them were built in this 12th to 13th century. You have 3 castles that were built in the 10th century. You have 4 castles that were built in the 11th century. You have 8 castles that were built in the 12th century. You have 15 castles that were built in the 13th century and 10 that were built in the 14th. And as we talked about, there were a couple that were built in the 19th century, but those are the babies. They're not even worth counting at this point. Now, the 9 Years' Wars had a lot of castles that were destroyed during that time, right? So, as we heard when we were listening to this, 1689 had the most castles destroyed during that 9-year wars. In total, there were 23 castles that were destroyed under the French forces of Louis the 14th. And however, many of those castles were then restored during the 19th century with the Romantic period revival of the castles. So the Romantic Rhine is that 19th century revival, and a lot of it had to do with different things. So the castle ruins inspired painters, poets, and composers. You had a lot of wealthy noble people and industrials who would purchase and rebuild it. You also had the literary fame, so writers like Victor Hugo and Mark Twain popularized the Rhine castle tourism, and then that tourism boom is what we're talking about now, right? So steamship travel made the Rhine more accessible to tourists seeking that romantic landscape and was what has created the modern, river cruise. So the Rhine Gorge, which is what we've been talking about today, and I cannot wait for you to hear it from your cruise managers who are going to do such a better job listing off all of these names than I did and some of those fun lores and histories. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it has been since 2022. 2002. They are constantly doing restoration projects to maintain these historical treasures for the upcoming, generations. And the Rhine castles attract millions of visitors annually, which really helps support that local economy and that cultural heritage. So with that, I wanted to kind of just say thank you for joining us on our Rhine River cruising masterclass. We were able to kind of go over the magnificent castles along the Rhine River from Basel to Koblenz. This is basically going to be part 4 of our Rhine River series. And the next part we're going to go over is the Rhine Gorge. And I will mention some of the folklore on the next episode, like the Lorelei statue and things of that nature. And we will be going all the way until you get to Basel. And then that will be our next episode after that will be 3 days in Basel or Zurich and how I would spend them or not spend them. But I'm not going to tease you that much on an episode. That's 2 episodes away. So thank you again for listening to the River Cruising Masterclass. If you have any questions about river cruising, castle history, if you have questions about it, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email address is sydney@thepoodlebooked.com, and I cannot wait to help you plan your next vacation, whether it's a river cruise, a European destination, or just that once-in-a-lifetime trip that you guys have planned next. With that, I will hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for listening.